My name is Emily Carter. And I was 38 years old when my mother banned me from my father's funeral in front of everyone who came to say goodbye. I arrived at the funeral home holding a white lily arrangement I had ordered myself. Because no one in my family had told me the service time until a cousin quietly texted me the night before. When I reached the chapel doors, my brother Daniel stepped in front of me and said, "Mom doesn't want you here." Then my mother appeared behind him in a black dress, looked me up and down, and said, "Your father made his wishes clear. You don't belong in this room." So I stood outside the chapel while strangers walked past me to mourn my own father. I was about to leave when a man in a navy suit walked into the lobby carrying a leather claim folder. He looked around the room, then asked the funeral director, "Which one of you is Emily Carter?" My mother stopped crying. My brother stopped blocking the door. And the man opened the folder and said, "I'm with Northbridge Life Insurance. We need her signature before anyone in this family can file a claim." The funeral home smelled like lilies, furniture polish, and rain-soaked wool coats. I remember that more clearly than I remember the faces at first. Because grief has a strange way of turning people into shapes and smells before they become real again. I stood in the lobby holding the white lily arrangement I had ordered with my own money, staring at the chapel doors where my father's name was printed on a small gold plaque, Thomas Carter, beloved husband, father, and friend. Beloved father. I read those words twice, trying to make them fit the man who had not called me in 6 months. The man whose funeral I had only learned about because my cousin Sarah texted me after midnight and said, "Emily, I don't know if anyone told you, but the service is tomorrow at 10. I had driven through 2 hours of rain to get there. Nobody from my immediate family had called. Not my mother. Not Daniel. Not Aunt Carol, who usually knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. Still, I came, because whatever had happened between my father and me, I could not let strangers say goodbye while I stayed home, pretending I didn't care. I was reaching for the chapel door when Daniel stepped in front of me. He wore a black suit, a silver tie, and the same calm expression he used whenever he believed the room belonged to him. "Emily," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." I looked past him. Inside the chapel, I could see rows of people sitting with programs in their hands. A framed photo of Dad stood beside the casket. My mother was in the front row, a tissue pressed under one eye. "Move." "Daniel," I said. "I'm here to say goodbye to Dad." He didn't move. "Mom doesn't want this today." This I asked, me standing in a funeral home, his mouth tightened. "You know what I mean." Before I could answer, my mother appeared behind him in a black dress, pale but perfectly composed. She looked at the flowers in my hands, then at my face, and said, "Your father made his wishes clear. You don't belong in this room." The words were soft enough that the funeral director couldn't call them a scene, but loud enough that everyone near the lobby heard. A woman from Dad's church turned her head. My cousin Sarah stood frozen near the guest book, eyes wide with guilt. I looked at my mother and asked, "When did he say that?" She lifted her chin. "Before he died," Daniel added. "Don't make Mom repeat painful things." That was always his gift. Turning someone else's cruelty into my lack of sensitivity, I stood there holding the lilies, feeling every stem press into my fingers, and waited for one person to say I had a right to be there. No one did. The funeral director stepped closer. Uncomfortable. "Mom, perhaps we can find a private room for you." A private room. Not the chapel. Not a seat. A place where the unwanted daughter could grieve quietly out of sight. I handed him the flowers because I suddenly couldn't hold them anymore. "Put these near him, please," I said. My mother looked relieved, and that hurt more than her words. Relief meant she had expected me to leave. Relief meant this was not grief speaking. This was a decision. I turned toward the exit, rain visible through the glass doors. When the lobby doors opened behind me, a man in a navy suit stepped inside, carrying a leather folder stamped with the Northbridge Life Insurance logo. He spoke briefly to the funeral director, then looked around the lobby. "Excuse me," he said. "I need to speak with Emily Carter." The room went still. My mother's tissue stopped halfway to her face. Daniel turned sharply. I slowly looked back. The man opened his folder and said, "Before any claim can proceed, we need her signature." 6 months before my father's funeral, he called me from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer because unknown numbers usually meant sales calls, medical billing mistakes, or someone asking whether I wanted to sell a house I didn't own. But something made me pick up. "Emily." His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. My father had always had a quiet voice, but this was different. Thin, tired. "Dad," there was a pause. "Don't hang up." That was the first thing he said to me after almost half a year of silence. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "How are you?" Just don't hang up. So, I didn't. He asked if I could meet him at a diner near the county courthouse. Not near my mother's house. Not near Daniel's office. Not anywhere the family usually gathered. When I arrived, he was already there in the back booth with a cup of coffee untouched in front of him and a brown envelope beside his hand. He looked older than he had at Christmas. His shirt hung loose around his shoulders, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear on my father's face. "I only have 20 minutes, he said. "Your mother thinks I'm at a doctor's appointment." I sat down slowly. "Are you sick?" He looked at the envelope instead of me. "That's not the only reason I asked you here." For years, Dad had let my mother speak for the family. If Mom said I was difficult, Dad sighed and looked away. If Daniel needed money, Dad called it helping him get back on his feet. If I needed understanding, Dad called it drama. So, hearing him speak in a low voice, away from everyone else, I felt like watching a man try to open a locked door from the inside. He pushed the brown envelope across the table. "Keep this somewhere safe." I didn't touch it. "What is it?" He glanced toward the diner entrance, like someone might have followed him. "Insurance paperwork." "A copy." "Not the original." My stomach tightened. "Why are you giving it to me?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "Because I changed something. And if anything happens to me, your mother and Daniel are going to say, I didn't mean it." That sentence made the diner noise fade. Changed what I asked. He looked directly at me then. "My life insurance beneficiary." I stared at him. "Dad, I don't want your money." "I know," he said quickly. "That's why." The answer made no sense until he continued. "Daniel has borrowed against everyone's future for years. Your mother keeps pretending he's unlucky instead of irresponsible. If the insurance goes straight to her, half of it will disappear into fixing his problems before the funeral flowers wilt." I opened the envelope just enough to see the top page. Northbridge Life Insurance. Beneficiary designation confirmation. My name appeared halfway down the first page. But before I could read more, Dad placed his hand over it. "Not here," he said. "Read it at home." "And Emily." His voice broke in a way I had never heard before. "If they tell you I didn't want you there, don't believe them." I looked up. "At what?" He gave a sad little smile. "Anything important." Then he stood. Left $10 on the table for coffee he never drank, and walked out into the rain. I sat in that booth for 10 minutes with the envelope under my hand, not knowing that 6 months later, the same paperwork would stop my mother from erasing me from the last room my father ever occupied. I didn't open the brown envelope until almost midnight. It sat on my kitchen table for hours while I made tea. I didn't drink, washed a mug that was already clean, and checked my phone 6 times, even though no one had called. There are some documents that feel heavy before you read them because you already know they carry a truth someone else will try to bury. When I finally slid the papers out, the first page was exactly what Dad had said. It was Northbridge Life Insurance. Beneficiary designation confirmation. Policyholder Thomas Carter. Primary beneficiary Emily Carter. 70%. Secondary beneficiary Linda Carter. 30%. Daniel's name was not listed anywhere. I read the page 3 times because I thought I had misunderstood. My father had not left everything to me. He had not cut my mother out completely. He had done something quieter and more deliberate. He had made sure I had authority over the main claim, while still leaving my mother something she could not honestly call nothing. At the bottom of the page was his signature, witnessed by a Northbridge representative named Marcus Hale. Attached behind it was a letter from Dad in his own handwriting. Emily, if you are reading this, because I did not get to explain it myself, I know this. I am not choosing money over family. I am choosing the one person who never asked me for any. The next morning, Daniel called me for the first time in months. I let it ring because Dad's words were still open on the table in front of me. 10 minutes later, Mom called. Then Daniel again. Finally, a text came from my brother. Dad seemed confused yesterday. If he contacted you about paperwork, don't sign anything until we talk. I stared at the message, feeling the first cold piece slide into place. Dad had met me privately, but somehow Daniel already knew enough to worry. I saved the text, took a photo of the insurance confirmation, and placed the originals in a fireproof box. I did not reply. That evening, Dad called again. His voice was weaker than before. Did you read it? He asked. Yes. Are you angry? I looked at the page with my name on it. I'm confused. He gave a quiet, tired laugh. That makes 2 of us. Then he told me something I had never known. Years earlier, when Daniel's business failed, my parents had taken a loan against a smaller policy to help him. Mom had called it temporary. Daniel had called it family. Dad had spent years paying it back quietly. I enabled too much, he said, and I stayed silent too long. This is the only thing I could still set straight. Before hanging up, Dad said one more thing. If Daniel or your mother bring you a change form after I'm gone, don't sign it. My hand tightened around the phone. Why would they? He was silent for a long moment. Because people who feel entitled to something don't always stop at asking. That sentence stayed with me. I added Daniel's text to a folder on my laptop and named it Dad Insurance Records. At the time, it felt dramatic. 6 months later, when a Northbridge claims specialist walked into the funeral home asking for my signature, I would understand that Dad hadn't been dramatic at all. He had been preparing me for the first document my family would try to make disappear. The first claim packet arrived 3 weeks after Dad gave me the envelope, long before he passed away. That was the strange part. It came in a white Northbridge life insurance envelope addressed to my mother. But my name was printed in the reference line because I was now listed as the primary beneficiary. I only knew about it because Dad called me from the garage, whispering like someone afraid the walls had learned to report back. Emily, he said, did you receive anything from Northbridge? I looked at the empty mailbox beside my door. No. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Your mother got a policy review packet today. Daniel saw your name on it. I sat down slowly. What did he say? Dad gave a tired laugh without humor. He said there must have been a mistake. I could almost picture Daniel standing in my parents' kitchen, holding papers he believed should have belonged to him, using that calm voice that always made other people feel unreasonable for questioning him. Dad continued. Your mother asked why you were on the policy at all. I told her because I put you there. I waited. And he sighed. She cried. Daniel got very quiet. That worried me more than the crying. My mother's tears were familiar. Daniel's silence meant he was calculating. 2 days later, Daniel texted me a photo of a blank Northbridge form. Change of beneficiary request. Under it, he wrote, Dad is confused. We need to correct this before it causes problems. I stared at the screen until the words became something heavier than a message. Correct this. Not discuss this. Note ask Dad. Correct this. A minute later, another text came in. Mom says if you sign now, we can keep this private. I saved both messages, then forwarded them to the Dad Insurance Records folder. I did not answer. That evening, Dad called again. Did Daniel contact you? I said yes. He went silent. Then he said, Don't sign anything. His voice was sharper than I'd heard it in years. Dad, they're saying you're confused. I know exactly what I signed. He said. Marcus Hale witnessed it. Northbridge has my confirmation on file. I passed their verification questions. He coughed, then lowered his voice. Emily, listen to me. If they try to make you feel guilty, remember this. A beneficiary form is not a love letter. It is a legal instruction. They don't have to like it for it to be real. That sentence became the first line I wrote in my notes that night. A beneficiary form is not a love letter. It is a legal instruction. Under it, I listed dates diner meeting. Envelope received. Daniel's first text. Northbridge review packet. Change forme sans. I didn't know yet whether I was preparing for a family argument or something worse. But I had learned enough from the last few years to know that when people start calling a signed document confusion, what they usually mean is that the document says something they don't like. The next morning, I called Marcus Hale at Northbridge. I expected a receptionist. Instead, he answered directly. When I gave him my name, his tone shifted. Ms. Carter, your father told me you might call. My hand tightened around the phone. Did he really understand what he signed? Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes. I met with him twice. He was clear both times. He also asked us to flag the policy against beneficiary changes submitted without direct verification from him. I closed my eyes. Why would he ask that? Marcus paused. Because he said someone might try to fix what he had already decided. Dad's health declined faster after the Northbridge call. At first, it was small things, shorter phone calls, longer pauses, the sound of him catching his breath between sentences. Then one afternoon, he called me from his car and said, Emily, I need you to know something before your mother turns it into something else. I sat down because his voice had that careful quality again. The one he used when he was afraid of being overheard. What is it? He took a breath. I want you at my funeral. I closed my eyes. Dad. No. He said softly. Listen. If they tell you I didn't want you there, that won't be true. I want you there. I don't know if I'll be brave enough to say it in front of them before the end. So I'm saying it now. I wrote the date and time of that call in my Dad Insurance Records folder. I hated myself a little for doing it. But Dad had taught me that paperwork was coming. And paperwork needed memory. A week later, my cousin Sarah texted me that Mom had started discussing funeral arrangements just in case. Sarah didn't know about the insurance documents, but she knew enough to be uneasy. She sent me a screenshot of a group message I had not been included in. Mom had written, "Service will be family only. We don't need unnecessary tension." Daniel replied, "Agreed. Keep Emily out of planning." I stared at that message for a long time. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed what Dad had warned me about before it even happened. I called He sounded weaker, but clear. They're planning the funeral without me, I said. He was quiet. I know. That answer hurt more than denial would have. Did you tell them to keep me away? His response came immediately. No. Then he coughed for almost 10 seconds before continuing. I told your mother I wanted both my children there. And Daniel's dad gave a tired sigh. Daniel said funerals shouldn't become performances. I laughed once. Bitterly. Meaning me. Meaning anyone who reminds him he doesn't control the whole story. Dad said. That was the sharpest thing I had ever heard him say about my brother. 3 days later, Dad asked me to meet him one more time. But he was too tired for the diner. Instead, we spoke in the parking lot outside his clinic. He stayed in the passenger seat while I stood by the open door in the cold. Both of us pretending this was normal because naming how bad it had become would make it too real. He handed me a folded sheet of paper. It was not a legal document. It was a note in his handwriting. Emily, I want you at my service. If anyone says otherwise, show this to Marcus Hale. I looked at him. Why? Marcus' dad's eyes were wet. Because Northbridge requires all primary beneficiary claim signatures. If they try to file without you, he'll know something is wrong. That was the first time I understood the connection between the funeral and the insurance. My mother and Daniel were not only trying to manage grief, they were trying to manage access. If I was not in the room, I could not hear what was said. If I was not told the service time, I could not ask questions. If I looked like the daughter who stayed away, then any paperwork that appeared afterward would carry their version of the story. Dad reached for my hand. I should have protected you sooner, he said. I know that doesn't fix it. I shook my head, crying despite myself. Then why now? He looked at the clinic doors. Then, back at me. Because I don't want the last thing I leave you to be silence. 2 weeks later, Dad was gone. No one called me. I found out from Sarah just after midnight. In a text that began with, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. Attached beneath it was the funeral notice. Service tomorrow. 10 a.m. Family Chapel. I sat on the edge of my bed with Dad's handwritten note in one hand and the Northbridge confirmation in the other. My family had done exactly what he feared. They had made grief into a guest list. But this time, I wasn't arriving empty-handed. I had Dad's note. Daniel's texts. Northbridge's policy flag. And the name Marcus Hale. I just didn't know he would arrive at the funeral home before the first hymn ended. The service had already begun when Marcus Hale walked into the funeral home. I was still standing near the lobby entrance, halfway between leaving and collapsing, with rainwater dripping from the hem of my coat. Inside the chapel, I could hear the first hymn starting. My mother had taken her place in the front row like a grieving widow in a photograph. Daniel seated beside her with one hand resting on the program. To anyone watching from a distance, they looked heartbroken. To me, they looked organized. That was the part that frightened me most. They had not forgotten to call me. They had arranged the day as if my absence was one more floral detail. Marcus spoke quietly to the funeral director first. I could not hear everything, but I saw the director's expression shift when Marcus opened the Northbridge folder. Then Marcus turned toward the chapel doors and asked, "Which one of you is Emily Carter?" My mother turned around so quickly, the tissue slipped from her hand. Daniel stood before I did. "This isn't the time," he said. Marcus looked at him calmly. "I agree. That's why this should have been handled before the service." Then he looked past Daniel, directly at me. "Ms. Carter, I'm Marcus Hale, Senior Claims Specialist with Northbridge Life Insurance. I'm sorry for your loss." I walked toward him slowly, aware that every conversation in the chapel had softened into whispers. My mother rose from the front row and came into the lobby. her black dress moving like a shadow behind her. "Mr. Haile," she said, forcing a trembling widow's voice. "Whatever this is, it can wait. We are burying my husband." Marcus nodded with professional sympathy. "Mrs. Carter, I understand. Unfortunately, Northbridge received a claim packet this morning that requires immediate clarification." My mother's face tightened. Daniel was only trying to help me file. Marcus opened the folder and removed a page. "The packet lists you as sole beneficiary and includes a change request naming Daniel as contingent beneficiary." He paused. "But our current verified beneficiary designation does not match that." The lobby went silent. Even the him behind the doors seemed farther away. My mother looked at Daniel, then back at Marcus. Thomas was confused near the end. She said, "He made changes he didn't understand." There it was. The exact sentence Dad had warned me about. I looked at Marcus. His expression did not change. Northbridge anticipated that concern. "On on," he said. "Mr. Carter completed 2 verification meetings. One was recorded with his consent. He also asked us to flag the policy against posthumous changes submitted by family members." Daniel's face lost color. "Posthumous?" I asked. Marcus turned one page around so I could see the timestamp. The change request had been uploaded at 7:42 that morning. Dad had been dead for 2 days. My mother's voice rose for the first time. "That is not what it looks like." Marcus did not argue. He simply placed another document beside the first. "Then we will review it properly. But until this is resolved, no claim will be paid." Daniel stepped closer. "You can't discuss policy details with her." Marcus looked at him, then at me. "Ms. Carter is the primary verified beneficiary on record. We cannot process any claim without her participation." For the first time since I arrived at the funeral home, the room stopped treating me like an intruder. Not because my family allowed it. Because a document did. The funeral director quietly closed the chapel doors. But it was too late. Everyone inside had heard enough to know something was wrong. The hymn faded into a nervous silence. And through the narrow glass panel in the door, I could see relatives turning in their seats, pretending not to watch while watching everything. My mother stood between Marcus Hale and me with one hand pressed to her chest. Not like a woman grieving, but like a woman trying to hold a story together before it split open in public. Thomas would be ashamed of this, she whispered. Marcus looked at her calmly. "Mrs. Carter." "Mr. Carter specifically asked Northbridge to prevent this." Daniel stepped forward. "My father was ill. He wasn't thinking clearly." Marcus opened another section of the folder. "That is why we completed a capacity verification call and an identity confirmation meeting." He placed a printed summary on the small lobby table. "Date. Time. Representative. Witness." I saw Dad's name, Marcus's signature, and a line that said policyholder confirmed beneficiary change voluntarily and understood impact. My mother's face hardened. Emily pressured him. For the first time, I spoke. I didn't even know until he gave me the envelope. Marcus turned another page. "Our notes confirm is." Carter was not present for either verification meeting. That detail seemed to disturb Daniel more than the rest. His eyes flicked to the chapel, then to the funeral director, then back to Marcus. He was calculating how much the room had heard. My mother tried again. Softer this time. "Mr. Haile. Surely we can discuss this after the service." Marcus nodded. "We can continue the investigation after the service. But the claim packet submitted this morning is frozen immediately." The word frozen moved through the lobby like cold air. My Aunt Carol gasped near the guest book. Sarah covered her mouth. Daniel lowered his voice. "You're humiliating Mom at her husband's funeral. I looked at him and said, "No. You used Dad's funeral to submit a false claim." That was the first time my mother looked afraid of me. Not angry. Afraid. Because I had finally named the thing directly. And Marcus had the folder to prove it might be true. He removed one more page. There is also a beneficiary claimant acknowledgement requiring Emily Carter's signature. It appears someone attempted to proceed without it. Daniel's jaw tightened. "We thought she wouldn't come." Marcus looked at him. "That is not the same as having legal authority." For a moment, nobody moved. Then the chapel doors opened. Cousin Sarah stepped into the lobby, holding a folded program in her hand. Her voice shook. "Uncle Thomas wanted Emily here." My mother turned on her. "Sarah." "Not now." Sarah swallowed hard. But she didn't step back. "He told me 2 weeks ago. He said if anything happened, I should make sure she knew the service time." She looked at me, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, I only texted you last night. Aunt Linda told everyone you already knew." Marcus slowly wrote that down. Another witness. Another piece of the morning my mother had not controlled. The funeral director cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to delay the service for a few minutes?" My mother looked at the chapel, then at the folder, then at me. For the first time all morning, she didn't know which performance to choose. Daniel reached for her elbow. "Mom? Go sit down." Marcus closed the folder halfway. "Ms. Carter," he said to me, after the service, "I'll need to review your father's copy of the beneficiary confirmation. If you have it." I looked at my mother as I answered. "I brought it." Her face went completely still. The service resumed. But it no longer felt like a funeral. It felt like a room pretending not to know there was a second room inside it. One made of signatures, timestamps, claim packets, and whatever my mother and Daniel had uploaded that morning. I sat in the back row because no one offered me a seat with the family. And, for the first time, I didn't ask for one. The white lilies I had brought were beside Dad's casket now, placed slightly lower than the larger arrangement from my mother, but still there. I looked at them through most of the prayer because I couldn't look at the front row. Mom dabbed her eyes perfectly. Daniel stared straight ahead. Marcus Hale stood quietly near the lobby doors with his Northbridge folder under one arm, waiting like paperwork itself had put on a navy suit. After the final prayer, people moved toward my mother in a careful line, hugging her, touching her arm, saying things grief requires, even when truth is standing 10 feet away. I waited until the room thinned. Marcus approached me first. "Ms. Carter," he said gently, "do you have the copy your father gave you?" I nodded and opened my bag. The brown envelope was inside a plastic sleeve, along with Dad's handwritten note, AIMRNA, Daniel's texts, and the screenshot Sarah had sent me. I placed the envelope on a side table near the guest book. My mother saw it from across the room and started walking toward us immediately. "That's private family property," she said. Marcus looked at her. "Mrs. Carter, this is a copy of an insurance document related to an active claim review." Daniel came behind her. She could have altered it. Marcus did not react emotionally. He put on a pair of thin gloves, removed the pages, and compared the beneficiary confirmation against the records in his folder. "This matches the confirmed designation on file," he said. Then he looked at Dad's handwritten note. "Emily, I want you at my service. If anyone says otherwise, show this to Marcus Hale." Marcus read it twice. His expression changed then. Just slightly. Note shock. Recognition. "Your father told me he intended to write something like this." My mother's face tightened. Thomas was afraid of confrontation. Emily took advantage of that. I looked at her, and something in me finally stopped trembling. No. Mom? Dad was afraid of you and Daniel, turning his wishes into a story that served you. Daniel stepped forward. Careful. Marcus immediately lifted one hand. Mr. Carter. Do not intimidate a claimant during an active insurance review. Claimant. The word landed between us like a gavel. For years, Daniel had spoken to me as if I were an inconvenient sister. Marcus spoke as if I had standing. There is a kind of dignity that comes when someone outside the family refuses to use the script they wrote for you. Then Sarah came over with her phone in her hand. I have the text from Uncle Thomas, she said quietly. My mother turned on her. Sarah. Enough. But Sarah was already showing Marcus. It was a message from Dad sent 2 weeks before he died. If Emily is not told about my service, please tell her. She has a right to be there. Marcus asked Sarah to forward it to him. She did. Another record. Another witness. Another piece of Dad's voice my mother had failed to bury. Marcus saved it, closed the folder, and said, Northbridge will now open a formal review of the claim packet submitted this morning. My mother whispered. What does that mean? Marcus looked at Daniel, then back at her. It means no money moves until we know who tried to move the truth. Marcus Hale did not accuse anyone in the funeral home. That was what made him more frightening than if he had raised his voice. He simply took each document, placed it in order, and let the paper create the shape of what my mother and Daniel had done. First, Dad's verified beneficiary confirmation. Then the handwritten note saying he wanted me at the service. Then Sarah's text showing Dad had asked someone outside our immediate family to notify me if they didn't. Then Daniel's old messages telling me not to sign anything. And finally, the claim packet submitted that morning listing my mother as sole beneficiary with Daniel added as contingent. Marcus photographed each page, logged it, and said, This is now a contested claim review. My mother sat down in the first chair she could reach. Contested, she whispered, as if the word itself had insulted her. Marcus nodded. Yes. Mrs. Carter. Northbridge must determine whether the claim packet submitted this morning was accurate, authorized, and consistent with the current beneficiary designation. Daniel folded his arms. This is ridiculous. We were trying to help Mom through a difficult day. Marcus looked at him. Then you'll have no problem explaining why a change request was uploaded after your father's death. The room went silent again. Daniel's face hardened. I didn't upload anything. Marcus opened the folder. Then the investigation will confirm that the funeral director offered us a private conference room near the back of the building. My mother resisted at first, saying the guests would wonder where she had gone. But Marcus calmly replied, They're already wondering. That ended the argument. In the conference room, Marcus placed a claim review form on the table and asked me to verify my contact information. My mother watched like each letter of my name was a personal betrayal. When Marcus asked if I had possession of Dad's original copy, I said yes, but only the copy he gave me, not the original policy. Marcus nodded. That is enough for today. Northbridge maintains the policy record. Then he asked my mother one question. Mrs. Carter, did Thomas Carter personally instruct you to file a claim, naming yourself as sole beneficiary? She pressed her lips together. Thomas wanted me taken care of. Marcus wrote that down. That was not my question. Daniel leaned forward. She just buried her husband. Don't interrogate her. Marcus turned to him. Mr. Carter, this is a claim review, not a family meeting. For the first time, I saw Daniel realize that his usual language had no power here. He could call me dramatic, selfish, disrespectful, difficult. Northbridge only cared about dates, signature, and authorization. Marcus then pulled out a printed upload receipt. The packet was submitted through the online portal at 7:42 a.m. today from an account associated with Linda Carter's email. My mother looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the table. Marcus continued. The attached change request bears a typed signature dated yesterday. My father had already been dead yesterday. I felt the air leave my lungs. My mother said quickly, Daniel, help me with the computer. Daniel snapped. Mom. There it was. Not a confession. Not yet. But a crack. Marcus wrote both sentences down without comment. He looked at me next. Ms. Carter. Until this review concludes, no benefit will be released. You are not required to sign anything today. In fact, I recommend that you don't. My mother's eyes flashed. So she gets to hold everything hostage, I answered before Marcus could. No. Dad's signature gets to hold the line. That sentence surprised even me. Marcus closed the folder and gave one small nod. Outside the conference room, people were still sharing sandwiches, coffee, and condolences under soft funeral home lighting. Inside, the real memorial had begun, not for the version of my father my family wanted to perform, but for the final decision he had made when he was still alive. Still clear. And finally brave enough to put the truth in writing. Marcus Hale asked for a signature verification before anyone left the funeral home. My mother reacted as if he had accused her in front of the entire chapel. You cannot be serious, she said, one hand still clutching the damp tissue she had used during the service. Marcus stayed calm. Mrs. Carter. A change request was uploaded after Mr. Black Carter's death. The signature date conflicts with the death certificate timeline. Northbridge is required to verify it. Daniel leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. So now you're saying we forged something? Marcus looked at him evenly. I'm saying the document cannot be accepted without review. Those are different statements. He placed 2 pages on the table. The first was the verified beneficiary designation Dad had completed 6 months earlier. The second was the uploaded change request, naming my mother as sole beneficiary and Daniel as contingent. Even from where I sat, I could see the difference. Dad's real signature leaned slightly upward at the end. The T in Thomas, clean and sharp. The uploaded form looked flatter. Rushed. Almost copied from memory. My mother stared at the table. Daniel stared at Marcus. I stared at the signature and felt sick. Not because of the money, but because someone had tried to make my father speak after he no longer could. Marcus pointed to the dateline. This form is dated the day after Mr. Plies. This form is dated the day after Mr. Plies. Carter passed. My mother whispered. It was prepared before. Marcus nodded. Then, Northbridge will need proof of that. Email records. Draft history. Witness confirmation. Any direct communication from Mr. Halsis. Carter. Daniel said. Dad wanted Mom protected. Marcus answered. Then his verified policy already protected her at 30%. That one sentence cut through the room. Dad had not abandoned my mother. He had limited her access. There was a difference. And Daniel hated that the paper made it clear. Then Marcus turned to me. Ms. Carter, do you have any written communication from your father regarding his final designation? I opened my folder and handed him Dad's note from the clinic parking lot. Emily, I want you at my service. If anyone says otherwise, show this to Marcus Hale. Marcus placed it beside the signatures. This will be added to the review. My mother looked at the note like it had betrayed her. He shouldn't have involved you. For the first time, my voice didn't shake. He involved me because he knew you would try to remove me. Marcus closed the folder. The next step is referral to Northbridge's Special Review Unit. Until they complete signature verification and portal activity review, no funds will be released. No beneficiary changes will be accepted. and no claimant may pressure another beneficiary to sign. He looked at Daniel when he said the last part. Daniel's jaw tightened. This is going to destroy Mom. I looked at him. Then at my mother. No. Dad's decision didn't destroy anything. Your attempt to erase it did. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Marcus gathered the papers into the leather folder and stood. Ms. Carter, I'll contact you within 48 hours. Please preserve every message, note, and document you have. I nodded. My mother stood too, suddenly smaller than she had been when she blocked the chapel door. Emily, she said, your father would hate seeing us like this. I looked toward the chapel where his flowers still stood beside the casket. Then maybe you should have let me say goodbye before turning him into paperwork. Marcus called me 46 hours after the funeral. I was sitting at my kitchen table with Dad's brown envelope open in front of me. In the same envelope, he had slid across a diner table 6 months earlier with shaking hands and a warning I had not fully understood. My phone rang at 8:12 in the morning. Northbridge Life Insurance appeared on the screen. For 1 second, I could not breathe. Then I answered. Ms. Carter, Marcus said. Our special review unit has completed the first stage of the portal audit. His voice was professional, but softer than it had been at the funeral home. Before I explain, I want you to know something. I met your father twice. The signature on the uploaded change request is not how he signed his name. I sat down slowly. So it was fake, Marcus paused. The formal conclusion will come from the investigator. But the inconsistencies are significant. The uploaded request was submitted from an account associated with your mother's email. The IP address traces to your parents' home network. The document was created after your father's date of death. Despite being backdated, I looked at Dad's note on the table. If anyone says otherwise, show this to Marcus Hale. Did Mom upload it? I asked. The portal credentials were hers. Marcus said, but we also found a device name attached to the upload. My hand tightened around the phone. What device? Daniel Carter MacBook. For a moment, I heard nothing except the refrigerator humming behind me. Daniel's MacBook. Mom's account. Dad's signature. A dead man's name placed on a form after he was gone. Marcus continued. There is more. Your mother completed the claimant certification electronically before the funeral service began. She certified that all information in the packet was true to the best of her knowledge. There it was. The part that made this about both of them. Not just Daniel. My mother had not simply been confused or grieving beside him. She had certified the claim. She had put her name under a version of my father's wishes that she knew at least deserved questioning. Marcus asked if I still had Daniel's texts about the change form. I said yes. Send everything again to the secure link. I'm emailing you now. He said. Texts. Your father's handwritten note. Sarah's message. And any call logs showing you were not informed about the service. I asked what would happen next. Marcus exhaled. And for the first time he sounded tired. Northbridge will open a formal misrepresentation review, depending on what the investigator finds. The uploaded change request may be rejected entirely. The original beneficiary designation would remain in effect. Then he added, quieter. Your father anticipated pressure. I don't think he anticipated this. After the call, I uploaded every file. Danielle's texts. Mom's message. Sarah's screenshot. Dad's notey. The envelope. The beneficiary confirmation. The timeline I had been keeping since the diner. When I clicked submit, I expected to feel powerful. I didn't. I felt sad. There is something uniquely painful about proving your family lied. Because each piece of evidence confirms that they had chances not to. Mom could have called me. Daniel could have stopped. Dad could have been honored without all of this. Instead, the truth had to travel through an insurance portal because my own family would not let it enter through the funeral door. That evening, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. Emily, whatever Marcus told you, remember your father would not want his family destroyed over a policy. I saved it. Then Daniel texted, you have no idea what Mom is going through. I saved that too. 10 minutes later, Marcus emailed me one more document. It was a copy of the claimant certification my mother had signed at 741 a.m. the morning of the funeral. Under the final statement was her electronic signature. Linda Carter. I stared at it for a long time because the document answered the question I had been afraid to ask. My mother had not only let Daniel try to erase Dad's final decision, she had signed her name beside the attempt. The investigator from Northbridge called the next morning at exactly 9:30. Her name was Denise Whitaker, and her voice had the calm, careful tone of someone who had spent years listening to people explain why a document said one thing while the truth said another. Ms. Carter, she began. I'm reviewing the disputed change request submitted on your father's policy. This call is being documented. I need to ask you several questions about your contact with Thomas Carter before his death. I looked at Dad's brown envelope on the table. I understand. Denise didn't ask how I felt. She asked dates. When did Dad meet me at the diner? When did he give me the envelope? When did Daniel first contact me about signing a change form? When did I learn about the funeral? Her questions were dry. But it's easy. And exactly what I needed. Feelings could be dismissed. Dates could be checked. After 20 minutes, Denise said, your timeline matches the records we have from Marcus Hale. Then she paused. There is one item I want to confirm. Did your mother ever tell you directly that your father wanted you excluded from the funeral? I closed my eyes and saw my mother in the black dress, standing behind Daniel at the chapel door. Yes, I said. She said, your father made his wishes clear. You don't belong in this room. Denise asked me to repeat the exact wording, then read it back to me. Hearing it in her voice made it sound even colder. Thank you, she said. That matters because Mr. Etterbion, Carter's handwritten note and Sarah Miller's text contradict that statement. Then Denise asked about the uploaded change request. Did you ever sign, approve, or consent to any beneficiary change after your father gave you the confirmation copy? No. Did anyone ask you to sign a change form? Daniel texted me a photo of one. Did your mother ask you to keep it private? I opened the screenshot. Daniel wrote, Mom says if you sign now, we can keep this private. Denise was silent long enough for me to hear typing. Please upload that screenshot again to the secure portal under misrepresentation evidence. I did it while still on the phone. Near the end of the call, Denise said, I also need to inform you that Northbridge obtained metadata from the uploaded change request. It was created at 6:58 a.m. the morning of the funeral and submitted at 7:42 a.m. The document claims to have been signed by Thomas Carter. The previous day, my throat tightened. But he was already gone. Yes, Denise said. No drama. No gasp. Just, yes. We are treating the document as invalid, pending final review. We are also reviewing whether the claimant certification contained a material misrepresentation. My mother's electronic signature flashed in my mind again. Linda Carter. One click. One certification. One lie dressed as grief. Before hanging up, Denise's voice softened for the first time. Ms. Carter, I know this is difficult, but your father created a very clear record. That helps. I thanked her, though the words felt small. After the call ended, I sat alone at the kitchen table and realized something painful. Dad had spent years failing to speak up for me in rooms where he should have, but near the end, when he knew his voice might be buried, he finally did the one thing my family couldn't shout over. He wrote it down. The decision letter arrived 5 days later by email and certified mail. I saw the email first, just after 4 p.m. While I was at my kitchen table, pretending to work and refreshing my inbox more often than I wanted to admit. Subject line, Northbridge Life Insurance Claim Review Determination. My hand hovered over the mouse for almost a full minute before I opened it. The letter was 4 pages long, written in the cold, careful language of companies that know every word may be read by attorneys. But the conclusion was clear. The change request submitted after my father's death was rejected as invalid. The original beneficiary designation remained in force. I was still the primary beneficiary. My mother remained the secondary beneficiary. Daniel remained nowhere on the policy. I did not celebrate. That surprised me. I thought I might feel relief strong enough to knock the air from my body. Instead, I felt tired. The kind of tired that comes after holding a door closed for so long that, when the pushing finally stops, your arms don't know how to lower themselves. Denise Whitaker's report was attached beneath the decision letter. It listed the findings one by one. Metadata, inconsistent with the signature date. Portal upload from a device associated with Daniel Carter. Claimant certification submitted through Linda Carter's account. Prior verified beneficiary designation completed with identity confirmation. Written statement from Thomas Carter supporting Emily Carter's presence at funeral. Witness message from Sarah Miller. Each line was another nail in the lid of the story my mother had tried to build. At 4:17. Marcus called. I wanted to make sure you saw the determination before anyone else contacted you. He said, your father's designation stands. I stared at the page. What happens now? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Northbridge will process the claim according to the verified policy. However, given the attempted invalid submission, payment will require additional acknowledgement from you that you are not assigning your interest to anyone else under pressure. I almost laughed, because even now, Dad had predicted the pressure, so they can't force me to sign it over. No, Marcus said, and if anyone tries, you call me before you respond. My mother called 7 minutes later. I did not answer. Daniel called twice. I did not answer him either. Then a text came from Mom. We need to talk as a family before you let strangers decide your father's legacy. I looked at the decision letter on my laptop. Strangers had not decided Dad's legacy. Dad had. The strangers were the only ones willing to honor it. Daniel texted next, if you take that money, you prove everything Mom said about you. I saved the message and forwarded it to Marcus. His reply came back quickly. Preserve all pressure attempts. Do not engage. That evening, Sarah came over with soup and sat across from me at the same kitchen table where Dad's brown envelope still rested in a plastic sleeve. She read the decision letter quietly. When she finished, she wiped her eyes and said, he really did try to fix it. I nodded. But there was an ache in that truth. Too late, I said. Sarah reached across the table. Maybe, but not never. That sentence stayed with me. Dad had been silent too long. He had let my mother and Daniel write too many chapters without correction. But at the end, he wrote one document they could not erase. It did not repair everything, but it stopped the final lie from becoming permanent. Before Sarah left, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Denise Whitaker with a final attachment titled Misrepresentation Notice. Northbridge was sending formal notice to my mother that the submitted change request was rejected and that any future claim communication had to go through the review department. At the bottom, one sentence stood out. Northbridge will not recognize beneficiary changes submitted after the policyholder's death or claimant pressure inconsistent with verified designation. I read that line 3 times. It was not warm. It was not emotional. But it was justice in the only language my family could not talk over. My mother asked for a family meeting the next afternoon. Not through a phone call. Through Sarah. That told me she knew I would not come if she asked directly. Sarah read the message out loud while standing in my kitchen with her coat still on. Aunt Linda says everyone needs to sit down before this gets uglier. I looked at the Northbridge decision letter on my table. It got ugly when they tried to file a change request after Dad died. Sarah nodded. I know. Then she hesitated. But if you go, don't go alone. So I didn't. I brought Sarah Dad's brown envelope, the Northbridge decision letter, and every message Marcus had told me to preserve. We met at my parents' house. But it did not feel like going home. It felt like walking into a room where every chair had already chosen a side. My mother sat at the dining table with Daniel beside her. Aunt Carol was there, along with 2 cousins who looked like they regretted coming before I even took off my coat. Mom started before I sat down. Your father would be heartbroken. I placed the decision letter on the table. Dad made a verified beneficiary designation. Northbridge honored it. Daniel laughed bitterly. Listen to you. Northbridge. Verified. Designation. You sound like you're proud of turning Dad into a transaction. I looked at him. No. You did that at 7:42 inches the morning before his funeral. My mother flinched. But she recovered quickly. I signed what Daniel told me needed to be filed. There it was. Not an apology. A transfer of blame. Daniel turned toward her. Mom? She held up one hand. No. Daniel, I am not losing everything because of your mistake. The room went silent. For the first time, she had said, the quiet part where other people could hear it. I opened the folder and slid the claimant certification across the table. This is your electronic signature. You certified the packet was true. Mom stared at the page. I was grieving. I said. So was I. You still left me outside the chapel. Aunt Carol whispered. Linda. And did Thomas really write that he wanted Emily there? Sarah answered before my mother could. Yes. I saw the message too. Daniel pushed back from the table. This is insane. Emily always gets to play victim. I reached into the brown envelope and took out Dad's handwritten note. I don't need to play anything. Dad wrote it down. I read it aloud. Emily, I want you at my service. If anyone says otherwise, show this to Marcus Hale. Nobody spoke after that. Even Daniel looked away. Mom's eyes filled with tears. But they were not the tears from the funeral. Tears were angrier. Sharper. He embarrassed me. She whispered. Your father embarrassed me by doing this. That was the real confession. Not that he had hurt the family. Not that he had been confused. That he had made a decision she could not control. I stood slowly. No. Mom? Dad embarrassed you because the paper proved you were lying. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. Sarah stood too. Don't. She said. It was one word. But it stopped him. Maybe because for once, someone else was watching. I gathered the documents back into the folder. Northbridge is processing the policy, as Dad wrote it. I'm not signing anything over. I'm not discussing the payout with you. And if either of you contact me about assigning my share, Marcus gets the message. Mom looked at me like she no longer recognized the daughter she had trained to feel guilty. Then you're choosing money over family. I shook my head. No, I'm choosing Dad's last clear instruction over the lie you wanted everyone to remember. Then I walked out with Sarah beside me, leaving the room with the only thing my mother had never been able to control, the final version in writing. 6 months after the funeral, the policy was closed exactly the way Dad had written it. Northbridge paid my share directly into an account I opened at a bank my family did not use. And my mother received the portion Dad had left for her. I did not announce it. I did not post about it. I did not buy anything dramatic to prove I had won. I paid off the small debt I had been carrying, set aside part of the money for taxes, and donated a portion to the hospice program that had helped Dad during his final weeks. The rest stayed where it was, quiet and protected. Because by then I understood something. Dad had tried to tell me with paperwork before he could say it with words. Money is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a boundary written in numbers. My mother never apologized for the funeral door. She sent one email 2 months later that said, "I hope you're happy with what you did." I saved it. Not because I needed to use it, but because I no longer trusted family history when she was the only narrator. Daniel stopped calling after Marcus sent one final warning about beneficiary pressure. Sarah and I stayed close. Every year now. On Dad's birthday. We meet at the same diner where he gave me the brown envelope. We order coffee. Neither of us really drinks. And we talk about the version of him that tried. Too late, but not never. To tell the truth, I still keep Dad's note in a folder labeled Thomas Carter Final Wishes. Inside are the beneficiary confirmation, Sarah's text, the Northbridge decision letter, and the handwritten line that changed everything, Emily. I want you at my service. If anyone says otherwise, show this to Marcus Hale. That sentence did not erase the years when Dad stayed silent. It did not turn him into a perfect father. But it gave me one final truth. My mother and brother could not edit. He wanted me there. He knew they might say otherwise. And for once, he made sure the paper spoke when he couldn't. People ask if I think the insurance money was justice. I don't. The justice was not the payout. The justice was the record. It was Marcus standing in a funeral home and refusing to let grief become a cover story. It was Sarah stepping forward when silence would have been easier. It was Northbridge saying a signature matters. A date matters. A dead man's wishes matter even when the living find them inconvenient. My family tried to turn me into the daughter who didn't show up. Dad left enough proof to show I had been kept outside. The last time I visited his grave, I brought white lilies again. I placed them beside the stone and stood there longer than I expected. I'm still angry, I whispered. But I know you tried. The wind moved through the cemetery trees. And for the first time, that was enough. Not forgiveness wrapped in a bow. Not a perfect ending. Just enough truth to stop carrying the lie. Because sometimes the final gift a parent leaves is not money, property, or an apology. Sometimes it is one signed document that says, when everyone else tries to erase you, you were here. You mattered. And you had every right to say goodbye. A funeral door should never become a courtroom. But sometimes grief is the place where hidden character finally steps into the light. My mother thought black clothes and quiet tears would make her version of the story look sacred. Daniel thought standing at the chapel entrance would make him the keeper of my father's memory. But memory does not belong to the loudest mourner. It belongs to what the living can prove and what the dead were careful enough to leave behind. The white lilies I carried that day were not expensive. They could not argue, accuse, or defend me. But they were honest. They said I came. They said I tried. And when my family tried to turn me into the daughter who stayed away, my father's envelope answered for me. That is why records matter. Not because paper can replace love, but because paper can protect love from being rewritten by people who benefit from the lie. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.